Thanks for listening to Goddab Radio, a podcast for progressive thinking people. I'm Mad Dog Manser, and I'm here to bring you relevant and honest news and information that I find compelling. Our show is often about cannabis, but not strictly. We will cover a number of other issues depending on what's happening, and we'll feature guest interviews regularly. At Goddab Radio, we are ferociously progressive, fiercely skeptical, and vehemently scientific with a no-nonsense attitude. Today is Friday, March 10th, and on our show today we will be covering fluoride poisoning, or at least the conspiracy theory and debunking the decades-old myth. We have our Carnival Barks segment where we will rip so-called President Trump for accusing former President Obama for wiretapping him during the campaign. We also have cannabis news, a big story on cannabis testing this week from Oregon Cannabis Connection. It's a lot to take in, but it's important for Oregonians to know what's going on with cannabis testing in our state. We want to thank our sponsors for helping make Goddab Radio possible: Honey Badger Sungrown, Oregon Cannabis Connection newspaper, and Southern Oregon Alternative Medicine. We also want to thank Eric Sky for allowing us to use his amazing song, One for the Green, to open and close our show. You can catch Eric with a couple of his friends at the Community Music Center just down the street from Goddab Radio Studio in Southeast Portland on April 1st. Check it out on Eventbrite. That's Eric Sky with an E. We start off our show this week with some discussion about water fluoridation. For decades really now, since the 1940s or 50s, when they started adding fluoride to water across America to help people not get cavities in their teeth, there has been a really staunch opposition, I should say, from a small group of people that truly believe that fluoride in the water, that it's a conspiracy theory, that they believe that the government is trying to control us. One of the ultimate conspiracy theories of all time, of course, that the fluoride is a way of the government either poisoning us or controlling us in some way. One of my favorite places always to go, and that I usually use to do my conspiracy theory debunking on the show, is Rational Wiki. I would really recommend anybody that's interested in finding out more information about any sort of controversial subject, basically, to go ahead and check out Rational Wiki. And their section on fluoride in water is quite good. I'm just going to actually read you directly from this, some of the information that they've got. Since its inception in 1940s, the scientifically sound concept of fluoridating water has given rise to fear and suspicion in the minds of some. Fluoride works by converting the outer layer of tooth enamel made of hydroxyapatite, oxalapatite. Okay, I'll try that one more time. Hydroxylapatite. I think I got that. To fluorapatite. That's it. The latter chemical, the fluorapatite, is less soluble in acidic solutions. The three most commonly added fluoride chemicals are sodium fluoride, fluorosilicic acid, and sodium fluorosilicate. Fluorosilicate. Fluorosilic acid is a byproduct of phosphate fertilizer manufacture, a fact which fluoride opponents repeat ad absurdum in an attempt to scare you. Ad absurdum, it says. Actually, that's really funny. Ad absurdum. Got to remember that one. Due to a pressing need among cranks to rationalize away why our average person won't just accept the facts as provided by truthers, the term fluoride stare has actually been popularized in the fringe. This term denotes the embarrassing glance of non-judgmental, though palpable, disbelief given by those whose first reaction to having been dragged through a lecture on Obama being a reptilian isn't, yes, it all fits. So from 1945 onward, the United States started to focus, and the rest of the world, to focus on deployment of fluorides in water. which became widespread across the United States. One last bastion of hope for modern anti-fluoridationists has been the city of Portland, Oregon. As of, people probably don't know this, as of 2014, it is the last of the largest metropolitan cities in the United States to remain unfluoridated, despite 4 popular vote attempts to add the chemical. In the United States, the Safe Drinking Water Act of 1974 confers the authority of ensuring the safety of public drinking water to the Environmental Protection Agency. And of course, with old so-called President Donald Trump in office, the EPA is being gutted as we speak. So the arguments for fluoridation is that it's safe, it's simple, and an effective way to improve the dental health of the population at large. It's extremely cost-effective as well. For every $1 a city invested in fluoridation, it saves an average citizen $38 on dental care. That's pretty good. The Centers for Disease Control considers water fluoridation to be one of the top 10 public health advances of the 20th century. The American Dental Association, quote, unreservedly endorses a fluoridation of community water supplies as safe, effective, and necessary in preventing tooth decay, unquote. The World Health Organization states that fluoridation of water supplies, where possible, is the most effective public health measure for the prevention of dental decay. And in 2006, the National Research Council, or NRC, published a review of the EPA's drinking water standard of fluoride. The report noted potential negative effects due to fluoridation, including cognitive impairment, impaired thyroid functioning, and increases in bone fractures, in addition to the fluorosis of children's teeth. But, of course, you need huge amounts. The NRC called for a reduction of the EPA's limit of 4 milligrams per liter of fluoride in drinking water. It should be noted that this was a much higher standard than the recommended levels for water fluoridation. In June of 2012, some news organizations transmitted a press release by the NYS Coalition Opposed to Fluoridation, Inc., which suggested that a 2012 Harvard meta-study on the effects of water fluoridation and child IQs found significantly lower IQ in children. What a ghastly thing to see coming from real scientists doing real science. However, if you actually read the paper and look at Table 1, the study compared children in areas with recommended levels of fluoride in water, the same levels that are introduced in the process of water fluoridation, to children in areas with high fluoride levels. In other words, and yet again, this paper documents the risks of chronic fluoride toxicity, not water fluoridation. Quote, our study summarized the findings of 27 studies on intelligent tests in fluoride-exposed children. 25 of the studies were carried out in China. Also, quote, in general, complete information was not available on these 27 studies, and some limitations were identified. So not only were the studies lacking complete information and were limited in scope, they were also all conducted in China, a country with severely lacking academic freedoms from the state. Wow. And then the arguments against fluoridation, the more standard ones that you see, most arguments against fluoridation are based on ethical and moral issues, namely that water fluoridation is medicating large numbers of people without their explicit consent. Curiously, they don't typically complain about regulations that add drugs to other foods like iodide added to salt, vitamin D added to milk, iron added to cereal, or folic acid added to flour. Despite fluoride naturally occurring in food and water, a common argument against it is the appeal to nature. Most health effect arguments against water fluoridation base their assumptions on much higher doses of fluoride than are allowed in municipal tap water and the excessive cherry-picking of studies. Additional studies on links between fluoride and cancer and fluoride on bone fractures have been shown to be invalid. Other arguments are based on the false assumption that if fluoridation worked, there would be no tooth decay. Of course, right? The fluoride adverse effect of the anti-fluoride crowd, dental fluorosis, is a scary sounding but rather benign condition in which the teeth become slightly stained. It is a purely cosmetic issue that does not lead to tooth decay, whereas removing fluoride from the water does if individuals do not brush their teeth regularly. In all, but the most severe cases, the mottling is barely noticeable, and it's only significant in children whose teeth have not finished developing. But the EPA opposes fluoridation. That's another classic argument. Deniers will typically claim that 1,500 plus EPA scientists are opposed to fluoridation. Upon closer inspection, however, this study is actually a grievance letter written in 1999 by J. William Hersey, Ph.D., on the letterhead of his local National Treasury Employees Union, Chapter 280. The letter, far from representing the views of 1,500 scientists, actually the union represents all employees, which include non-scientists like lawyers. It's really the result of a poorly attended meeting of one local union chapter. With only 20 of said union chapter members in attendance, Hersey and his followers were able to adopt a resolution opposing fluoridation. When it became obvious to the wider union that Hersey and his local chapter were falsely presenting their fringe position as representing the view of the entire union, the chapter officers, who actually represented the majority of the members, rapidly disowned Hersey's position. After the above incident, Hersey seemed to have gone on to become the deniers' go-to guy. But the National Research Council opposes fluoridation. Deniers will hand-wave a 2006 500-plus page report by the National Research Center's Committee report on fluoride in drinking water and claim that it opposes fluoridation. And of course, claims will be accompanied by cherry-picked scare quotes. The study makes no claims against water fluoridation. The report merely reviews the evidence for safe levels. But the World Health Organization opposes fluoridation. Deniers will make various claims that the World Health Organization opposes it, but as we read earlier in this, they do not. By way of evidence, they will point to various WHO publications about the need to remove fluoride from water. Deniers miss that these guides are for people living in areas where there is a dangerous concentration in the local drinking water due to natural sources, and a government unable to fund the technology to reduce it to a safe level. Because you can get fluoride toxicity if you have too much. Nobody denies that, okay? I'm just saying. But a bunch of Western European countries oppose fluoridation. They do this too. Mostly they're Western European nations, which lends their opinions, their position a gloss of respectability because, apparently Western Europeans have their shit together. Yeah, right. Okay. What they ignore is water fluoridation is a public health measure created to benefit the poor without means to access dentists. They typically list nations like Sweden, Finland, Denmark, etc. It goes without saying these nations provide excellent, universal health care regardless of family income, including free access to dental care for children. So no wonder they don't have fluoride in their water. They don't need it. Oh, wow. Here's another one. But the freaking Nazis fluoridated the water in their death camps. One of the most wonderful examples of an unsourced anecdote mentioned once that gets repeated as fact for decades. The suggestion is the Nazis fluoridated the water to pacify the death camp populations. Apparently, starvation soldiers with guns and machine gun towers that would mow you down if you got too close to the fence were not enough to mollify the death camp population. That's just a stupid one, too. Really, really crazy. So anyway, if you're ever interested in getting some good debunking information, please go to Rational Wiki. That's probably going to be the main source of my information when I come to debunk people who have claimed this. And as far as toothpaste goes, that's another one. There's fluoride in the toothpaste. Of course, if you eat an entire tube of toothpaste, there's probably some fluoride toxicity that could happen. I mean, that just makes sense because a proper dose of fluoride in toothpaste is just a pea-size amount of toothpaste. So, yeah, if your child gobbles down a tube of toothpaste, you might want to check them for fluoride toxicity. I mean, that just makes sense, right? Okay. Anyway, that's about enough. If you want to prove to yourself that fluoride toxicity is real, you're not going to be able to do it. If you want to follow some websites that show you that fluoride, not fluoride toxicity, but fluoride poisoning from the water supply is real, then you're just going to have to go to some of these cranky or crankbait websites that are out there. There's just too many obvious and real serious examples of why it's not true. There's too much scientific evidence that it's not true. They've been studying fluoride for 70 years, and there's nothing to these claims, folks. So stop with the fluoride in our water conspiracy. If you approach somebody, or if you approach me and you ever say that to me, you're going to get the fluoride stare right back at you, because it don't make no sense to me. It's as bad as chemtrails, almost as bad as Sasquatch. All right. Enough for our conspiracy theories this episode. It's time to move on, because it's time for Carnival Barks, our weekly Trump roundup where we highlight recent alternative facts from the so-called president, a segment where we point out the absurdities, lies, and blunders coming from Trump and his inept administration. And of course, this week, we are just going to spend our time ranting about the lies that Donald Trump tweeted last Saturday. He sat down and he pulled out his little cell phone, which is, I assume he's using a cell phone. He does not use a computer, apparently. And he actually tweeted out this doozy. And actually, it's about 4 tweets that he ripped off in a row. First one, terrible. Just found out that Obama had my wires tapped in Trump Tower just before the victory. Nothing found. This is McCarthyism. Next tweet. Is it legal for a sitting president to be wiretapping a race for president prior to an election? Turned down by court earlier. A new low. Then he tweets, I'd better get a good lawyer. I bet a good lawyer could make a great case out of the fact that President Obama was tapping my phones in October, just prior to election. And then his doozy. How low has President Obama gone to tap my phones during a very sacred election process? This is Nixon/Watergate. Bad or sick guy. Okay. This is just beyond compare. You probably, folks have been hearing about it all week. It kind of got glossed over by the healthcare getting released, the healthcare package that freaking Republicans came up with, which is just a joke. And we'll talk about that next week, maybe. But you know what? The problem here is that this guy just accused the former president of committing a felony, acting that the former president could actually tap his phones or could get that done without proper authority. You know, what's really scary is that he thinks that this is possible. So what does that really mean? That means that Donald J. Trump, our fake president, thinks that he can wiretap somebody, possibly. I mean, he really thinks that he has that kind of authority and power. And that's a really fucking scary idea, people. Of all of the ideas of him just accusing this is ridiculous. The idea that he might think that a president could really do that is the scariest part of this of all. If anybody out there who voted for Trump had any reservations and have overcome that somehow by telling themselves that it's going to be okay, it's not going to be okay. The man is completely fucking unhinged, okay? Completely unhinged. To make these accusations is absurd. Of course, within hours of these accusations, there were people scrambling to find out if this was true. There were Republicans all over Washington in charge. Mitch McConnell and the Speaker Ryan and everybody else is getting asked if they think that this is true. And if they're going to do what, of course, Trump ended up wanting done later in the day on Saturday. And he made these tweets first thing in the morning. I mean, it was first thing in the morning. He actually suggested that Congress should investigate this. He believes Congress should investigate his false claim that Obama tapped Trump Tower. I mean, it's just beyond compare. And unfortunately, there are a couple of congressmen and senators that are at least giving wordplay to this idea that they might be going to investigate this. I mean, it's just, you can't do that. It's not something that is going to happen. And Trump is just, he's such a buffoon. Such a buffoon. He's a clown for a president. You folks realize that. He's a clown. He's a orangutan parading as president. God, I love it when Jon Stewart would go after him and do the orangutan thing. Oh, no, it's Bill Maher. Jon Stewart, too, goes after him. But Bill Maher with the orangutan comparison and getting sued by Trump is priceless. Priceless. I just love it every time he does it. So that's really our main carnival bark this week. I just literally was going to spend a few minutes bitching about Donald Trump accusing the previous president of tapping his phones. And you guys know where he got this, right? You know where he got this. He got this from Breitbart. And it's not because he doesn't watch a computer. He doesn't watch videos. He doesn't watch these guys who, like the guy who said this, the talk show host Levin. Levin, I think he goes by. What a freaking joke that is. Levin is his fucking name. And the son of a bitch put this idea out there, and Breitbart printed a transcript of what this joker said. And Trump, who's handed a bunch of papers every morning that from stories about him so that he can read what people are saying about him. He's such a damn narcissist. You guys realize this. Complete narcissist. He sits down and highlights parts of these that disturb him. And he ran across this report from Breitbart where they reprinted the transcript from this crazy fucking right-wing son of a bitch who's ranting about crap that isn't even true, and Trump actually believed it and picked up his phone and tweeted these stupid, absurd, and ignorant tweets. They need to take his fucking Twitter account away from him, number one, because he shouldn't have a Twitter account. It's just stupid. He's really a buffoon. The perfect word to describe this idiot. He's not very bright. I don't know how he got into an Ivy League school. Of course, it was University of Pennsylvania. That was it. I mean, and he claimed that he got an honors degree. He graduated with honors. He did not. He was not even on the dean's list while he was at the Wharton School of Business at University of Pennsylvania. He's a liar. He's a complete and utter liar. He's not worth anything. People think he's worth $1 billion. Are you kidding me? What makes anybody think he's worth $1 billion? Nobody's seen his tax return for 15, 20 years. And the last tax return showed that he owed $1 billion in tax penalties that he was going to be paying off. It's just ridiculousness, absolute ridiculousness all around. And it's getting pretty sickening to watch this. That's all I got to say. So we're going to have to wait and see what's going to happen. Trump has done some other stupid shit this week. He's signing off on this healthcare package, which is supposed to repeal and replace Obamacare, and it's not going to do either one. They're not going to be able to repeal Obamacare because they don't have anything to replace it with, and rates are just going to skyrocket if they try it. The plan they proposed was absurd on its face. I'm not a fan of Obamacare. It did a few good things for a few people, but it really hurt everybody overall, mostly. What we need in this country is national health care. We need a single-payer insurance system so the federal government can basically put all these insurance companies out of business. Because what do insurance companies do for you? What do insurance companies do for you? They don't do anything except try to pay some bills and get you discounts from the doctor. They are making money for being a middleman. They're making money. All insurance makes money by preying on your fears. I don't care if it's health insurance, life insurance, car insurance. It doesn't matter what it is. The funny thing is, insurance didn't even exist until 1600 something, 1500. Lloyd's of London created the first insurance policy for ships sailing to the New World, people. In case the ship sank and they lost all of their goods. Okay, that's something to be scared of if you're a business and you can afford to buy something like insurance to take care of that cargo if you lose it. If you're wealthy, that makes sense. It makes sense, I guess. And their insurance is born. But now it's gotten to the point where you need insurance for everything. You have to have insurance to drive your car. The government doesn't provide you a state alternative for car insurance. You still have to buy private car insurance. I mean, that's fascism. They're making you buy private company products. The government is forcing you to buy products from a private company that are not even particularly regulated. Obamacare did not regulate the prices for your health insurance. It didn't. In fact, Obamacare left it open for insurance companies to raise those rates and to raise your deductibles. And what have they done? Both of those things. I predicted this. I knew it was going to happen. You can't do this. You can't force people to buy insurance and then try to penalize them on their taxes. It's nonsensical. And then the insurance companies are just making money hand over fist. Really, it wasn't the Affordable Care Act at all. It was really more just what I like to say is the American Insurance Enrichment Program. That's what it was. It made insurance companies in this country have a windfall of sudden profit, and some of the insurance companies are actually complaining now that they're going to take a loss because of they've had to insure all of these uninsurable people that they never had to deal with before. So they've got big bills they're having to fork some money out for. Aetna is having to pay for that brain tumor recovery from that kid who had the cancer, and they dumped off the policy, a year or two ago when he reached $1 million, and they were like, oh, well, you reached your limit. Sorry, you're done. That's what they do. That's how they make money. Insurance companies increase their bottom line by denying coverage to people who pay their premiums. That's the quickest way for them to make money. It's really a sickening business. People involved in the health insurance business should be ashamed of themselves. Health insurance is a scam. It's a grade A fascist scam. All insurance is, in my opinion, but health insurance most especially. Unless you provide a government option for me, do not tell me I have to purchase private insurance from a private company that can raise your rates and raise your deductibles and do all sorts of crap. It's just a bunch of bullshit. Grade A bullshit. Okay, so enough ranting from me. We want to thank our sponsors. At Honey Badger Sungrown, they care about providing natural products. There are no chemical pesticides and no chemical fertilizers used in their cannabis grow, and they are motivated with a passion for natural cultivation. They take pride in sustainable and environmentally friendly cultivation and produce their product on the beautiful Willamette Valley floor. Honey Badger Cannabis is available at a number of dispensaries, including Grow High Station in Portland and Stash Cannabis Company in Beaverton. Ask for Honey Badger Sungrown products at your dispensary. You can visit them online at www.honeybadgersungrown.com. Tired of pills? We can help. At Southern Oregon Alternative Medicine, we offer chiropractic and naturopathic medicine, massage, acupuncture, and medical marijuana therapy. With clinics in 19 locations across Oregon and main offices in Portland, Springfield, and Medford, we make it convenient and easy for you too. Southern Oregon Alternative Medicine is the only clinic of its kind to offer both medical marijuana certification and full health care. You can find us online at www.soaltmed.com or southernoregonalternativemedicine.com, or call us at 541-779-5235. Welcome back to Goddab Radio, Part 2 for March 10th, Friday. And in this section, we are going to cover cannabis testing in Oregon. This piece is from the Oregon Cannabis Connection, of course, and it's actually my piece that I've been researching over this past week and published it today. You can find it at occnewspaper.com. Oregon Cannabis Testing Realities. Many concentrates are contaminated with pesticides. Industry experts suggest changes to the rules would open the door to pesticide-tainted cannabis on Oregon's dispensary shelves, while others accuse labs of collusion to keep prices high. Yeah, that's what I said. Oregon Health Authority is proposing more administrative rules changes that would significantly dial back pesticide testing on cannabis flower and concentrates. Their proposal would reduce pesticide testing to concentrates to a single annual test on concentrate processors and screening of only 20% of cannabis flower batches for the recreational market. Currently, it's 33%. The OHA and Oregon Liquor Control Commission both suggested these changes are needed due to a backlog in pesticide testing by the few pesticide-certified labs in the state. But even though the backlog at labs contributed to a severe market shortages on extracts and edibles originally, more recently it's due to pesticide test failures and not a lab backup. Oregon Cannabis Connection covered the issue surrounding testing labs last year, focused on the lack of certified labs available to test cannabis, especially when the rules changed at the time the outdoor harvest, adding the requirements to use an Oregon Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Program approved laboratory. ORLAP is the acronym for that organization. The move was disastrous. Many people explained that it was not tenable, including the former ORLAP administrator Gary Ward, who warned last year that ORLAP program was, quote, on the verge of collapse, end quote. Quote, because of the lack of resources, the accreditation of both cannabis labs as well as drinking water labs, we're going to be seriously affected, end quote, Ward explained to the Statesman Journal in September 2016. His prediction was accurate. It became a complete mess, and according to Ward, the additional stress from his position and the narrow timeline brought about a heart attack, which made him decide to step down in January. Over the past months, we saw a flower shortage in October and November as the logjam blocked the flow from labs to dispensaries. Eventually, the flower supply recovered. We still see a shortage of concentrates on shelves, but it is now due to pesticide testing failures. Since edibles are made mostly from concentrates, the edible companies have struggled to keep products on the shelves as well. How we got here? The culling of inadequate laboratories and changes in testing costs were to be expected. Oregon had a requirement for testing cannabis, but no regulation over the labs for nearly 2 years, which allowed unscrupulous labs to set up shop and operate with inferior equipment, untrained personnel, and few, if any, standards for operating. It was the Wild West, and it was created by a requirement to test the cannabis, yet no regulations on laboratories. The cost for a full screen test was ridiculously low, with some lab rates at $100. At that price, no laboratory could properly perform the needed tests accurately and at a profit. But the Wild West was brief and dusty. The new requirement to be NELAP TNI certified meant that most labs did not qualify to test cannabis, especially for the full battery of required tests. The National Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Program, or NELAP, standards are the first step in Oregon lab standardization process, along with other rules to help labs operate using the same practices. Most labs did not have the procedures in place that are required to be certified, and that needed to be strictly followed to ensure accuracy. The good and reputable labs hunkered down and weathered the storm. They understood the new accreditation requirements meant the shoddy labs would soon be gone and testing prices would rise to proper, sustainable levels. Light was shed on the looming backlog problem in 2015 when suggestions were made that ORLAP should not be the only certifying body for the labs. There are a number of independent certifying agencies that were ready and willing to do accreditation across the state, which would have dramatically sped up the process, ensuring many labs were ready when the harvest deadline occurred. During the shortage, OLCC was given authority to change the testing rules if the market demanded. That's key. Orlap received nearly 30 applications for lab certification, but by the October 2016 testing deadline, only 4 had been fully approved to do the full array of required tests, including pesticides. 6 months later, 19 labs have been certified to do at least portion of testing, but there are still only 7 labs capable of doing the pesticide testing in-house, and only 6 labs capable of doing the full array of testing required by law. Even so, the backlog is now basically gone, and most labs are turning around tests in a week or less. After months of dictating rules to the industry and making changes with emergency memos repeatedly, usually with disregard for the industry or cannabis marketplace, the OHA decided that their public health and safety mandate should take a back seat to the needs of the cannabis market forces. Jonathan Modi, lead communications officer with OHA Public Health Division, told Oregon Cannabis Connection back in December of 2016, at the height of market shortages, quote, OHA's goal is to ensure marijuana consumers aren't exposed to potentially dangerous chemicals in pesticides, solvents, and other contaminants, not to ensure there is a sufficient supply of marijuana products on the market, unquote. They seem to have made a major shift in their approach. Oregon Live reported on March 2nd in their article, quote, Andre Orso, manager of the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program, said industry complaints about the cost of testing and delays faced by concentrate and extract makers getting their products to stores drove the proposals. Also, more testing means more expense for the consumer, he said. By law, the state is supposed to consider consumer cost as well as public safety in drafting its rules. He said the public may comment on the rules between March 15th through April 30th. New rules are expected to go into place June 1st. The agency will evaluate the public comment, he said. If it comes out of this is not something the public wants, the agency won't adopt the changes. Recently, Modi explained to Oregon Cannabis Connection, the best way to ensure compliance with rules intended to protect public health is by making sure they're not overly burdensome to the point where most of those required by law to follow them can't actually do so. Their new proposed testing rule changes discount the need for pesticide-free products and consumer safety and value the need for cannabis businesses to make money. Instead of focusing on the real problem, pesticide-tainted products, they have decided to address the shortage by simply and drastically reducing the number of tests needed. Pesticides were found everywhere. The backlog has decreased at the labs, and turnaround times are returning to normal. Most labs have a turnaround time under 2 weeks if doing in-house pesticide testing. The real motivator behind these changes is being driven by a large volume of pesticide-tainted concentrates. Since the bad laboratories have been removed from the equation regarding pesticide testing, and the OHA requires notification of pesticide test failures, a huge number of contaminated products popped up. Some of the newly accredited laboratories reported a 70% failure rate on concentrates they were testing, and over 20% on flour. The failure numbers reported from the OHA are 26% of concentrates and 10% of flour. The new, more accurate results sent a shockwave through the cannabis community in Oregon. Some concentrate processors and growers risk significant loss of product, and they were not prepared for that. One of the more common contaminants being found is carbaryl, the active ingredient in the pesticide 7. It's especially toxic and is found surprisingly often. There are a number of other common ones being found, and the rate of failure has been especially high at many labs, putting the low numbers reported by the OHA at odds with results by a number of reputable labs. Roger Volker, lab director of OG Analytical, explained, quote, we find pesticides on about 1/3 of flour and about 70% of the concentrates. Testing frequency is risk-based because of the horrible problem we have right now. Volker, who is a former Oregon Department of Agriculture laboratory chemist, said that the entire subject is complicated and requires an attention to detail, which has not been present in the rulemaking process. Quote, part of what we are dealing with is that it's complicated and no one wants to deal with the details, explained Volker. We don't have enough involvement from the Department of Ag, who knows these rules, and we don't have enough education for those being impacted. It's unfortunately technically complicated, but we don't have the luxury of oversimplifying it. An example of other risk-based assessment is found in the regulation of shellfish and the biotoxin domoic acid, a common contaminant found in Oregon. The Oregon Department of Agriculture routinely shuts down the harvest of clams and shellfish due to high levels of the toxin being detected by frequent testing. Although it's a naturally occurring compound, the frequency of its occurrence in the shellfish demands that the shellfish be tested frequently. And then there's some accusations without merit. One reaction of many in the industry has been to blame the cannabis testing laboratories. With tainted product, processors or growers are struggling to get products to market and are throwing around unsubstantiated claims and accusations that accusing them of collusion, creating regulations to benefit themselves, and price fixing. There is even chatter of a class action lawsuit against some labs for collusion and market tampering. Don Morse, president of the Oregon Cannabis Business Council, or OCBC, told the Oregonian, quote, "They want the most testing at the highest cost they can charge," unquote. He accused the laboratories of protecting their pocketbooks. According to their website, the Oregon Cannabis Business Council is a small industry association representing about 50 post-cultivation cannabis businesses, including processors and dispensaries. Morse is also owner and a founder of Human Collective Dispensary. Oregon Cannabis Connection asked Morse about the shortage problem and if he had any proof of his accusations that the labs have fixed the rules and are overcharging. Quote, "The OHA rules, as written, were over the top, and they were written by a group of people who did not fully comprehend their impact on the industry, which has been catastrophic," unquote, explained Morris on the current rules. Quote, "People can't get their product to market. It's too cumbersome and too expensive," unquote. He admitted that the flower shortage has mostly subsided, but pointed out that other areas of the industry are seeing problems. Quote, "The testing rules are certainly taking a much larger toll on processors and edible makers and topical makers. That's where it's really hurting the industry. They're using distillates and they're using concentrates, or they're just selling concentrates, and it's harder to find clean concentrates." He said the flower may pass testing requirements, but the final product ends up at levels that are too high due to the nature of the concentration, which, as its name implies, is derived from a process that concentrates the compounds found in and on the marijuana. He also questions the low concentration levels and the high number of pesticides that are screened for and are required in the rules. Morse believes these over-the-top rules were deliberately set by labs and that the labs had control of the process. Quote, "The people at the table originally coming up with these rules was the labs and some healthcare people and some poison control people," Morse said. "There was no industry there. It was the labs. And while some may be believing that they are acting in the best interest of health and public safety, I don't think it's a stretch to say, without appointing points of view there, that some might be interested in making rules that were in the best interest of their industry." Anybody in business, quote, "Anybody in business is in it to make money. It's just that I happen to choose a line of business that involves protecting the public. That's it," Roger Volkler of OG Analytical explained. "I don't apologize for having that motivation." Some facts about the testing rules. We asked OHA about the undue influence that the labs could have on the rules. Modi at OHA explained that the process for rulemaking, which was open to public comment and went through numerous rules advisory committees and a RAC testing subcommittee, involved numerous people, including other industry people, along with at least 3 agencies. Quote, "The RAC did include representatives from marijuana testing labs, but also representatives from other parts of the industry, including processors, dispensaries, patients, caregivers. Labs have no more influence over the rulemaking process than other members of the RAC," explained Modi. Additionally, the rules are OHA's under advisement of the RAC, and ultimately OHA is responsible for writing and filing the final rules for consideration, unquote. We also asked Modi specifically about the batch sample sizes in testing, which drives the higher costs on concentrates. Since a homogeneous mixture is difficult to ensure, a greater number of samples need to be tested. Quote, sample sizes are technical issues and are determined to best achieve the purposes of randomized and representative sampling, unquote, Modi explained. Quote, they were presented to the Rules Advisory Committee, subject to public comment initially. They were discussed by the first rack in the testing subcommittee. In the end, it was ORLAP that had the major input on the final rules. As Modi explained, they were presented again to the current rack for discussion and advice, but ultimately, ORLAP staff provided the best advice and expertise to set sample sizes. Unquote. ORLAP is eminently qualified to make the major decisions on the final rules. They are one of only 14 NELAP certified state agencies in the entire United States, and one of the most respected of those. Actually, quote, the original recommendations that we go to much more higher frequency and take much more material, Volker said. What we've got right now is a result of gross concessions relative to what experts were saying. And the testing costs have been overblown. Morse claims that currently a quarter of retail costs to consumers for concentrates can be attributed to testing. By the time a product gets to a retailer and is sold to a consumer, 25% of the cost of that product is attributable to testing, unquote. Also, quote, first you have to pay the testing of the flour, then you have to take the test on the oil again, and that's where the cost increases dramatically, unquote. He explains that the initial cost of testing gets multiplied by normal business markup, though it is a struggle to follow his math. We are not alone. John Thompson, better known as JT of Sublime Solutions in Eugene, Oregon, thinks the accusations of collusion are ridiculous. Quote, that's completely a fallacious and scurrilous argument, unquote, JT of Sublime Solutions said. Quote, with a process validation approval, soon I will be able to make batches of 28,000 grams. What my client is going to pay is just a few pre-screening costs and for the compliance test, which will cost about $700. The testing and batch cost of the cannabis flower is 10 cents to 20 cents per gram, according to most growers and labs. Some batches that are larger can be as low as a nickel a gram. A very small garden can expect to pay no more than 20 cents a gram to test a bag of the cannabis flower by a lab. Test and bag it, both. A batch test on concentrates can be more expensive due to the sheer number of tests required, but a batch can be many pounds, which can bring the cost to well under $1 per gram on concentrates. The absolute worst case is $5 per gram for testing, which is admittedly high for 16 ounces, or 454 grams of shatter. But the reality is, after a few tests, a reputable processor can submit a control study, which will allow concentrates to be tested for the same rate per gram as flour. Eventually, with more than robust process validation method, the OHA recently temporarily replaced with a control study method, a cost of under 3 cents per gram for testing would be normal. As for pesticide levels, JT has had no problems with pesticides since they started strictly pre-screening materials before processing. Before that, they had one batch fail, which prompted the implementation of their strict pre-screening protocols. Now they operate under a control study which validates their methods and allows for 2 sample tests to cover up to 4,000 grams of product. After $700 to $800 for the 2 tests, the cost for concentrate testing drops to 20 cents a gram. This current push about pesticides is coming from a small number of people that are crying, oh, it's so expensive. And it actually isn't when you consider what the margins are, explained JT. There is normal business cost, and if you can't budget for it, this is normal business cost. And if you can't budget for it and have a model that's going to make you competitive, that's your fault, and you're not going to be competing on the playing field too long. In reality, the tests could be more comprehensive than they are, which would drive up costs even more. The OHA dropped mold testing altogether, which seems extreme to many, but that removed a time-consuming test from the regime. They still must do half a dozen chemical analysis of the plant, including solvents, cannabinoids, and water activity, and screen for a number of pesticides. Quote, we are looking for only 59 compounds. In the other world of testing, like under the FDA, there are almost 300 compounds that you have to look for, Volker explained. The main changes in the rules will require concentrate manufacturers use flower that tests clean of pesticides, which any reputable processor should already be doing, but only have a single batch screen for pesticides annually. That is a dramatic difference from the 8 separate sample tests per batch of concentrate, especially when a minimum of 26% of the concentrate are failing pesticide screening, and very likely a much higher percentage than that. It's also very dramatically less than the very cost-effective control study method that most reputable concentrate manufacturers are receiving. Morse himself admitted that concentrate products are testing positive from cannabis that was supposedly clean, which just demands the final product needs testing. It's really a step backward for Oregon. Quote, these draft rules are absolutely 180 degrees the wrong direction for health and public safety in Oregon, explained Caleb Hayes of Oregonians for Public Health and Safety, a new political action group advocating for safe cannabis testing and funded by growers, processors, and laboratories. But also, these rules are also 180 degrees the wrong direction for the cannabis industry in Oregon. This is going to lead to news stories of contaminated cannabis in the market, and that will have a chilling effect on our economy in the cannabis space, he added. There is a growing sentiment that the tainted cannabis will cost Oregon's cannabis market a lot in the end. The image would not be good for the market and could draw the attention of federal regulators if Oregon has a state-sanctioned system with pesticide-contaminated products being sold to the public. Eventually, an interstate market would depend on clean cannabis as well. Cedar Gray, a grower and processor from Williams, Oregon, who sits on the Rules Advisory Committee that recently met regarding the testing, believes it's a terrible decision to relax testing rules. His sun-grown cannabis and extracts from Siskiyou sun-grown have no trouble passing the testing regime. Quote, it's apparent there's a problem, Gray explained to OCC. Over 50% of the concentrates and extracts my lab tested from OLCC licensees failed for pesticides. In my opinion, it's barely better than no testing at all. One problem the industry has seen in Oregon and elsewhere are pesticides on cannabis in the market. NBC Channel 4 in Los Angeles exposed a pesticide problem in California's cannabis market. Without a regulated testing system, there is no way to prevent similar problems here or clean up the ones that already exist. Quote, for good actors in the industry, these rules are not necessary, but you see from the amount of banned pesticides and products that there are bad actors in the industry, and these are the ones that the rules are intended for, Gray explained. So if we remove the requirement to test every batch of pesticides and concentrates, then we are removing the incentive for the bad actors to change their practices and clean up their product, unquote. Quote, the problem with these new proposed rules is that it cuts out the entire portion of the rules that are actually promoting the development of appropriate good manufacturing practices, Volker from OG Analytical told OCC. With a turnaround time of a week, there is no longer a backup at Oregon's cannabis testing labs. Even with a pesticide test failure rate at 33% at some labs, cannabis flower is in pretty good supply on dispensary shelves. The shortage of cannabis extracts and concentrates is due to pesticide failures, not testing backlog. The facts don't seem to support the recommended rule changes that are being considered unless you favor the business bottom line to consumer health and welfare. The realities beg for no changes at all, and possibly stricter reporting requirements from laboratories on pesticide failures, and even expanding the list of pesticides for which they should screen. They are taking public comment on these changes. The period runs from March 15th through April 30th. Please email ommp.labs, L-A-B-S, at state.or.us. That's ommp.labs at state.or.us. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Now you're all learned on cannabis testing in Oregon and what's really going on. Took a while to put that piece together, but I'm pretty proud of it. It's a long one. It took me half an hour to read it, darn near, 25 minutes. If you want to read it again and you missed part of what I was reading, go to occnewspaper.com, and it's under the Oregon heading. You'll find it. It was just recently posted. The title of the piece is Oregon Cannabis Testing Realities. Many concentrates are contaminated with pesticides. Yeah. Oh, we want to thank everybody for tuning in, of course, to Goddab Radio. This is our 8th episode. We've been actually doing our broadcast now for 2 months. I'm really excited, and we're glad you listened. Tune in again next Friday at 3 o'clock, or download us. You can find us at www.goddabradio.com, and you can also find us on iTunes and Amazon and TuneIn and Google Music Play and Stitcher and all the places you typically find podcasts. You should find us there, or just Google Goddab Radio. I'm Keith Mad Dog Manser, and join us again next week. Thanks for listening, everybody.